A millionaire pays a homeless woman to have a baby, but when the child was born, he was shocked by what he saw. Before we begin the story, comment below with the city you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. Ethan Morgan was a 42-year-old man who had everything: money, power, and status. But that night, he realized that despite all the luxury around him, there was one thing his money hadn't bought in air. He needed a child. But Ethan didn't want a family in the traditional sense. He had tried twice, and both marriages ended in failure and disappointment. He thought love was an illusion, something that only brought problems. But a child was different. It was an investment, a continuation of everything he had built. And now he was determined not to seek a relationship for this. He needed a clear agreement, without emotional entanglements, just a contract. He knew that with his resources he could find someone willing to carry the pregnancy without questions or emotional ties. For Ethan, this was a transaction. And like all his transactions, he would have total control. Now, he just needed to find someone who would accept the deal. The next morning, Ethan Morgan drove his sports car through the city streets. His mind, however, was focused on finding someone who would accept the contract. And while stopped at a light near downtown, something caught his attention. On the corner of the sidewalk, a young woman sat on the ground, drawing on a piece of dirty paper. She had messy brown hair falling over her face, and her blue eyes shone despite her tired appearance. She seemed invisible to others, but something about her caught Ethan's eye. He tried to ignore her, but when the light turned green, he looked again and thought, who draws on the sidewalk, as if nothing else exists? Annoyed with himself, he sped away, leaving her behind. But a few blocks away, something bothered him. He stopped in a parking lot and sat there, staring at the steering wheel. Then an idea came to him. This is ridiculous, he said to himself, but his instinct pushed him back. Reluctantly, he turned the car around and went back to where he had seen her. There she was, just the same, now leaning the paper against the wall. He pulled up to the curb and rolled down the window, his tone direct and cold. Hey, yo, come here. The young woman looked at him with suspicion, her eyes narrowed, evaluating the well-dressed man in the sports car. She hesitated. I'm not asking. Come on, I don't have all day, he insisted, not changing his tone. Slowly and reluctantly, she approached. When she finally stood next to the car, her thinness and the wear of her appearance were even more evident. Despite this, there was something in her posture, in the way she looked at him. What do you want? She asked, her voice low but firm. Ethan studied her for a moment before responding. Get in. I'll take you somewhere we can talk. She laughed dryly. I'm not one of those, if that's what you're thinking. He frowned, clearly irritated by the assumption. Don't be absurd. I don't have time for that. Now get in the car. You can keep living on that sidewalk. The hesitation was still there, but something in his authoritative tone left her no room for argument. Finally, she opened the door and got in. The silence between them and the car was heavy, but Ethan didn't seem to mind. He drove to a quiet cafe, away from the city noise, and parked. What's your name? He asked, as they sat at a table in the corner. Khloe Sullivan. But why does it matter? She retorted, keeping a suspicious look. Because I don't do business with strangers, Ethan said bluntly. Khloe crossed her arms. Business? What kind of business could you possibly want with someone like me? Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. I need someone to carry a child for me. No strings attached. A contract. Compensation included. I saw you and thought maybe we could help each other. Khloe stared at him, stunned. You want to pay me to have your child? Yes. She leaned back, letting out a disbelieving laugh. You must be out of your mind. I don't think so, Ethan replied, unfazed. I have lawyers who can draw up a contract. You'd be paid generously, and all medical expenses would be covered. You'd live in one of my properties with everything provided. After the birth, you walk away with the money. No contact, no responsibility. Khloe shook her head, trying to comprehend the situation. And why me? Why not some clinic or, I don't know, someone with a home and stability? Because I don't want complications. And because you have nothing to lose. His words stung, but Khloe couldn't deny their truth. She had been on the streets for almost a year. After losing her last job and being evicted, things had spiraled out of control. She had no family, no friends left to help. Still, this was insane. Jay. I need time to think, she said finally. You have 2 days. After that, the offer is off the table. Ethan stood, placed a card on the table, and walked out without another word. Khloe sat there, the business card burning a hole in her hand. Her mind was spinning. Could she really do something like this? Could she sell her body, her womb, for money? She stared at the door Ethan had disappeared through, unsure if he was a monster or some twisted kind of savior. That night, Khloe returned to the alley where she had been staying. She curled up with her backpack as a pillow, unable to sleep. The idea haunted her. She had spent months begging for food, dodging danger, feeling invisible. And now someone had offered her a way out, but at what cost? The next day, she spent hours wandering the city, lost in thought. She walked past mothers with strollers, couples laughing over coffee, teenagers glued to their phones. She felt like a ghost. Maybe she had been one for a long time now. When the sun began to set, Khloe found herself standing outside the address on the card Ethan had left. It was a tall, sleek building, modern and expensive. She stared up at it, heart pounding. What am I doing? She didn't know. But she went inside. The doorman looked at Khloe with obvious suspicion. She was wearing the same worn-out hoodie and jeans from the day before, her hair pulled into a messy ponytail. I'm here to see Ethan Morgan, she said, holding up the business card. The doorman hesitated. Do you have an appointment? He told me to come. He picked up the phone, dialed an internal number, and spoke briefly. After a moment, he nodded and pointed toward the elevator. Top floor. Khloe stepped inside the elevator, gripping the strap of her backpack tightly. Her stomach twisted as the numbers climbed. What was she doing? Why was she even here? When the doors opened, Ethan was already standing in the hallway, hands in his pockets. His sharp suit contrasted with her ragged clothes in a way that made her feel smaller than ever. You came, he said, voice neutral. I haven't decided anything, but I want to talk. He nodded and stepped aside, letting her enter the penthouse. The place was exactly what she expected. Luxurious, spotless, cold. Everything gleamed marble floors, tall glass windows, and silence that echoed. He gestured toward a sofa. Sit, Khloe did, keeping her eyes on him. You're serious about this? I don't waste time with games. What happens if I say yes? You'll live in a private residence. You'll have access to doctors, nutrition, anything needed for a healthy pregnancy. After the birth, you'll receive the payment in full and be free to leave. No further contact will be expected or allowed. And the baby will stay with me. Legally mine. Khloe hesitated. Can I see the contract? Ethan handed her a folder. The paperwork was already prepared. She flipped through it, overwhelmed by the legal language. Still, the financial figures jumped off the page. It was more money than she had ever seen or imagined. You'd have to undergo medical screening first, and sign a non-disclosure agreement. Of course, she muttered, setting the folder down. Ethan studied her carefully. You don't have to do this, Khloe, but if you do, understand that I expect discretion, discipline, and full commitment. This isn't charity, it's a deal. Khloe looked up at him. I understand. I'm not here for pity. For a moment, they stared at each other, to people from opposite worlds, colliding in the most unexpected way. I'll take the medical test, she said finally. Ethan nodded. We'll start tomorrow. He didn't smile. He didn't thank her, just turned away to make a phone call. And Khloe sat there, staring at the contract that would change her life forever. The next morning, Khloe found herself in a private clinic, sitting in an examination room that smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender. It was far cleaner and quieter than any hospital she had ever visited. A nurse drew her blood, took her vitals, and led her to a physician who asked her a series of medical and psychological questions. Khloe answered honestly, despite the gnawing discomfort in her chest. After the appointment, Ethan didn't speak much. He drove her to the apartment she'd be staying in, a fully furnished, modern space in a quiet, secure building. This is where you'll live for the next 9 months, he said, holding out a keycard. You'll receive a weekly stipend. Groceries are delivered, and there's a phone line for emergencies. Khloe turned in a slow circle, taking in the soft lighting, the clean counters, the empty silence. It felt like a luxury hotel compared to the shelter she had been sleeping in just days ago. I don't even know what to say. Don't say anything, Ethan replied. This isn't a favor. It's an arrangement. He handed her a printed scheduled doctor appointments, nutritionist meetings, and a list of approved vitamins and supplements. There's a driver who'll take you to each appointment. You're not to leave the premises without him. Khloe raised an eyebrow. Am I a surrogate or a prisoner? You're under contract. My investment, remember? Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. After he left, the silence felt heavier. For the next few weeks, Khloe followed every rule. She took her vitamins, went to appointments, followed the meal plans. Every time she looked in the mirror, she wondered what would happen if she actually bonded with the baby. Don't be stupid, she told herself. It's not your baby. Ethan, true to his word, never crossed a line. He didn't visit her often, didn't call unless it was about medical results. He was distant, businesslike, cold, and yet, every now and then, she caught a different side of him. Like the day she saw him bring books for a local orphanage, or when she overheard him scolding someone for mistreating a homeless veteran. There was something under the surface, something he didn't let anyone see. But Khloe didn't have the luxury of curiosity. She had a job to do and a future to earn, and so she focused on her health, on the baby, on staying invisible, just like she had before. By the end of the third month, Khloe began to show. Her mornings were a blur of appointments and check-ins. In the afternoons, she stayed inside, reading the few books she requested and listening to the occasional sounds of city life from her window. Sometimes she imagined what the baby would be like. Would it have Ethan's stern eyes? Would it be cold and calculating like its father? It's not your baby, she reminded herself again. She had signed the papers, taken the money. She had no right to wonder. But no matter how many times she told herself that, she couldn't shake the quiet bond forming between her and the tiny life growing inside her. Ethan rarely visited. When he did, it was quick, efficient. He'd ask how the pregnancy was progressing, check in with the doctor, and leave. He never touched her stomach, never asked how she was feeling emotionally. To him, it was purely medical. One day, during a routine ultrasound, the technician paused. "What is it?" Khloe asked, worried. "Nothing bad," the woman assured her. "It's just you're having twins." Khloe blinked. "What?" 2 heartbeats, 2 babies. It happens more often with certain procedures. Twins? Khloe left the clinic in a daze. Ethan was waiting by the car, as he usually was when something important was happening. "Well?" he asked. Khloe opened her mouth, but it took her a moment to find words. "It's twins. You're going to have 2 babies." Ethan's jaw clenched. He didn't say anything for a long time. "Are they healthy?" "Yes, perfectly." He nodded once. "We'll double your compensation." "I'm not asking for more," Khloe said quickly. "It's not a favor. It's a transaction." As they drove back in silence, Khloe stared out the window, hands resting on her stomach. 2 lives. 2. And for the first time since this whole thing began, she felt scared. Not because of the physical strain or the responsibility, but because of the realization forming in her heart. She was falling in love with the babies. Khloe began to dream of names. She didn't say them aloud. She never wrote them down. But late at night, as she lay in the silence of her apartment, she whispered them in her thoughts. 2 babies, 2 heartbeats. 2 souls that had never asked for any of this. She still went to every appointment. She still followed every instruction, but something had shifted. She no longer thought of herself as just a vessel. She felt like a mother. One morning, she felt the first flutter, a tiny movement barely noticeable, but it made her breath hitch. "They're moving," she whispered aloud, hand pressing to her belly. It happened again that afternoon, and she laughed softly, alone in the kitchen. When Ethan stopped by for the monthly medical review, she surprised herself by blurting it out. They moved. He blinked. "What?" "The babies. I felt them move today." For a moment he said nothing, his face unreadable as always. But then something unexpected happened. Ethan stepped closer and looked at her belly knot, with calculation, but with something like, "Ah, I see." It was all he said, but Khloe saw his eyes soften. Just slightly. After he left, she stood by the window for a long time, thinking, what would he be like as a father? Could someone so guarded, so cold, ever open his heart? A few days later, she received a package. Inside were two small plush animals, identical, soft, and brand new. No note, no card. But she knew who it was from. She hugged them to her chest and cried, not because she was afraid, but because for the first time she wasn't. As the pregnancy progressed, Khloe's days became more structured and lonelier. The only people she spoke to regularly were the doctor, the nutritionist, and the driver. Sometimes she would catch the cleaning lady humming softly as she worked, and Khloe would close her eyes and pretend she wasn't so isolated. But she was. Despite the comfort and care, despite the softness of the blankets and the warmth of the apartment, she was alone, except for the babies. They were growing rapidly now. Her body ached. She moved slower. Sleeping became more difficult. But every flutter, every shift, reminded her why she had agreed to this, and why she was beginning to fear the end. The idea of handing them over, of never seeing them again, haunted her more with each passing day. She tried to rationalize. She told herself it was the hormones, that she'd be fine once it was over, that she'd take the money, disappear somewhere warm, and start a new life. But the truth was, she didn't want to let them go. One evening, after a particularly exhausting checkup, Khloe returned home to find Ethan waiting in the living room. He rarely visited unannounced. "Is something wrong?" she asked immediately. "No," he said. "I just wanted to talk." She sat slowly, rubbing her lower back. "Talk about what?" Ethan hesitated. That alone startled her. "You've done well," he said. "Better than I expected." Khloe blinked. Was that supposed to be a compliment? "It was," he said, and then after a beat, "I know this isn't easy." "No, it's not." They sat in silence for a while. The room filled with the low hum of the city outside. Then Ethan said something she didn't expect. "I lost my brother when I was 17. Khloe looked up, surprised. He had never shared anything personal before. "He was younger than me, got sick. My parents couldn't afford the treatment at the time. It broke the family." She didn't know what to say. "That's when I realized money changes everything," he added. "I swore I'd never be powerless again." Khloe saw something behind his words. A wound still open, even after decades. "Money doesn't fix everything," she said softly. "No, but it helps." He stood to leave, but paused at the door. "You're doing more than carrying children, Khloe. You're giving someone a second chance." When he was gone, she sat there for a long time, hand on her belly. She wasn't sure anymore who she was helping most, Ethan or herself. The nursery arrived in pieces, crates filled with pastel-colored furniture, tiny clothes, soft blankets, and hand-picked storybooks. Khloe hadn't asked for it, hadn't even known Ethan was preparing one. Walked through the room slowly, running her fingers over the smooth wood of the cribs, the mobile hanging above them, the matching teddy bears perched on the shelves. It was perfect, thoughtful, ready, and it broke her heart. She knew this was real now, that Ethan wasn't going to back out, that the moment she gave birth, those babies would belong to someone else. She sat in the rocking chair and cried quietly, unable to stop the waves of emotion. This wasn't supposed to hurt. It was a transaction, a deal, temporary arrangement. But no amount of legal language or cold detachment could change the fact that she had fallen in love with the tiny lives inside her, with the lullabies she hummed when no one was around, with the idea of being something more than what she was. Later that night, Ethan stopped by unexpectedly, found her in the nursery, staring out the window. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said. "It's your house," she replied, not turning around. "It's your space, too." For now, she finally looked at him. "Why are you doing this, Ethan?" "Really?" he frowned. "I told you. I want children. But why like this? Why not just adopt? Or try again with someone who wants a family?" Ethan's voice was quiet. "Because I don't trust Isley, and I don't want love. I want certainty." Khloe looked away. Children aren't contracts. No, but they deserve stability. I can give them that. She didn't argue. Maybe he was right. Maybe love wasn't necessary to raise a child. Maybe safety and comfort were enough. But deep inside, a voice whispered, maybe not. Before he left, Ethan hesitated at the door. "If it's getting too hard, if you want to break the agreement..." "No," Khloe said firmly. "I made a promise. I'll keep it." Ethan nodded once, then walked out. and Khloe sat alone in the nursery, feeling like the walls were closing in. The 7th month came with swollen ankles, sleepless nights, and more frequent appointments. Khloe's body felt foreign, heavy, and aching in ways she hadn't expected. The twins kicked more now, especially at night, like they were talking to her in their own secret language. She spoke back sometimes, whispering to her belly while curled on the couch. She told them stories she made up on the spot, promised they'd be loved, even if not by her. But it was getting harder to pretend. Ethan, for all his distance, became more present. He came to more appointments, asked more questions, even started staying after to review the reports with her. He was still formal, still reserved, but his eyes lingered a little longer, his voice softened around her. One afternoon, after a sonogram, they sat together in the waiting room, the screen still showing the grainy image of the babies side by side. "They're getting big," Ethan murmured. "They're perfect," Khloe said, barely above a whisper. He glanced at her as if he wanted to say something more. But instead, he stood and walked out. The emotional push and pull exhausted her. Was he opening up, or just checking boxes? One evening, as she shuffled back from the bathroom, she found a note on the kitchen counter. It was written in Ethan's sharp handwriting. "You're doing better than anyone expected, thank you." It was only a sentence, but it undid her. She sat down and cried harder than she had in months, not from sadness, not even from confusion, but from the overwhelming ache of knowing that no amount of gratitude could erase what was coming. It was running out of time. The 8th month brought complications. During a routine exam, the doctor noticed Khloe's blood pressure had spiked. She was ordered to rest completely, no walking unless necessary, no stress, no tension. The risk of preeclampsia was too high, especially with twins. Ethan was there when the news came. He didn't say anything at first, but his jaw tightened, and he made a call immediately after the appointment. When Khloe returned home, the apartment had already changed. A nurse was assigned to check on her twice daily. A chef was brought in to prepare her meals. The windows were shaded, the air purifier adjusted. Even the bed was replaced with something designed specifically for expectant mothers with higher-risk pregnancies. Khloe lay there, surrounded by luxury and silence, feeling like a patient in a glass cage. Ethan visited that night. He walked in quietly, no suit this time, just jeans and a sweater, which made him look younger somehow. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Trapped," she admitted. "You need to rest. Nothing else matters." "I'm not a doll, Ethan. No, you're carrying 2 lives. That makes you a priority." Khloe studied his face. There was something different about his voice tonight. Less command, more concern. "Why do you care so much?" she asked. "Is it just because they're your children? Or is it because ... I'm the one carrying them?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He walked to the window, stared out for a long time, then finally said, "I don't know how to separate the two anymore." The admission stunned her. He turned to face her. "You weren't supposed to matter. This was supposed to be business. Clean, simple. But it stopped being that a long time ago." Khloe's throat tightened. She looked away, afraid of what she was feeling. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," he said. "Me too." And for the first time since they had met, they weren't Ethan the millionaire and Khloe the homeless woman with no options. They were just 2 broken people trying to navigate something neither of them understood. Together. The days that followed were quiet, almost fragile. Khloe remained on bed rest, only getting up to use the bathroom or sit in the sunlit corner of the apartment for a few minutes each day. The nurse came and went, cheerful and efficient. The babies continued to grow, their kicks stronger, more deliberate. Ethan visited nearly every evening now. Sometimes he brought her fruit, sometimes a book. Once, he brought a record player and soft vinyl jazz, saying the music might calm her nerves. They didn't always talk. Often, he'd sit in the armchair while she rested on the couch. The silence between them filled with something unspoken but not uncomfortable. One night, Khloe asked him, "Do you ever think about what they'll be like?" Ethan looked up. "All the time. I imagine one of them will be louder," she said, smiling, "bossier. The other one will probably be quiet and stubborn." Ethan chuckled. "Like us." She raised an eyebrow. "Which one's which?" "You're the loud one," he said, without hesitation. She really laughed for the first time in weeks. He watched her for a moment, then looked away. "They'll have everything they need, Khloe. I promise you that." "I don't doubt it," she replied softly. "But will they have love?" she added, barely audible. Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked over, knelt beside the couch, and placed a hand gently over her swollen stomach. They already do. Khloe's breath caught in her throat. She knew then whatever happened after the birth, whatever agreements they had made, nothing about this was simple anymore. And deep inside, she wasn't sure she wanted to walk away. It started just after midnight. Khloe had been drifting in and out of light sleep when the pressure in her lower back intensified. At first, she thought it was just another cramp. But then the tightening came again stronger this time, and closer together. She gasped, sitting upright in bed, clutching her belly. The nurse on duty heard the movement and rushed in. "Are you in pain?" she asked quickly. Khloe nodded, eyes wide. I think it's time." Within minutes, everything turned into a blur. Ethan was called. The driver was at the door. Khloe was carefully helped into the car, her body trembling with every contraction. By the time they arrived at the hospital, she could barely speak through the pain. Ethan appeared beside her, his usually calm face drawn with worry. "I'm here," he said, holding her hand as they wheeled her into the delivery room. "You're not alone." She wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but she couldn't do any of it. The labor was long, complicated. Twin deliveries were always more delicate. Her body, already under strain, fought every inch of the way. But hours later, through tears, grit, and a strength she didn't know, she had Khloe heard the sound that made everything stop. Crying. 2 cries, 2 tiny voices screaming into the world. She sobbed as the nurses placed the babies on warming trays. A boy. And a girl. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, staring through the glass at the fragile, perfect lives before him. Then, slowly, he walked over to Khloe's side and sat down. "You did it?" he whispered. Khloe looked at him through tear-filled eyes. "They're beautiful." "Yes," he agreed. "They are." And for the first time, Ethan took her hand without hesitation. They sat in silence together, watching the lives they had created breathe for the very first time. Khloe stayed in the hospital for several more days. The twins were healthy, but tiny, and the doctors wanted to monitor their progress closely. Ethan came every day, sometimes twice. He held the babies gently, carefully, as though afraid to break them. He didn't talk much, but his presence was steady, grounding. Khloe, meanwhile, was unraveling. She had expected to feel relief. The pregnancy was over. She was safe. She had upheld her part of the contract. The money would come. But she didn't feel relieved. She felt hollow. The idea of handing them over, of walking away like it had all been business, was tearing her apart. One evening, as Ethan sat beside her while she fed the babies, Khloe spoke. "I don't think I can do it." He looked up, confused. "Do what?" "Leave. Walk away. Pretend they're not mine." Ethan's face was unreadable. "You signed the agreement, I know." Her voice cracked. "But I didn't know I'd feel this." Silence hung between them like fog. "I never planned on keeping them from you," Ethan said finally. "But I also didn't plan on wanting you to stay." Khloe stared at him. "What are you saying?" He hesitated, then stood and walked to the window. "I'm saying I didn't expect any of this. I didn't expect to care about you. I didn't expect you to matter." Khloe's heart thundered in her chest. "You matter," he added softly, not turning around. When he did turn, his eyes were differentless guarded. "I want to raise them with you. That's something you want to..." She looked at the sleeping twins in her arms, then back at Ethan. It wasn't what she'd come for. It wasn't what they agreed. But maybe it was what they both needed. "I want to stay," she whispered. And for the first time, it felt like a beginning, not the end. Khloe's return to the apartment was different this time. She wasn't alone. The twins, nestled in matching carriers, were brought in gently by the nurse. Ethan followed close behind, quietly directing everything, but his eyes never strayed far from Khloe. The apartment. Once clinical and quiet, now felt like a home. Soft baby blankets draped over the couch. Bottles lined the counter. A warmth had settled in that Khloe hadn't realized was missing before. The days became a rhythm, feeding, burping, sleeping, changing. The twins cried, cooed, and filled every hour with their presence. Khloe was exhausted, constantly, but she had never felt so alive. Ethan adapted faster than she thought he would. He wasn't a natural, but he tried. He read manuals, learned how to swaddle, and was surprisingly good at calming the babies down when they were fussy. One night after the twins had finally fallen asleep, Khloe collapsed onto the couch, head in her hands. Ethan brought her tea and sat beside her. "You okay?" he asked gently. "I'm tired," she said, laughing softly. "But I'm okay. Better than okay, actually." Ethan looked at her, something thoughtful in his expression. "Do you ever regret saying yes?" he asked. She turned to him. "Is it the pregnancy or just staying?" "Both." Khloe didn't hesitate. "No, not for a second." He nodded slowly, then leaned back. "I never thought I'd say this, Khloe, but I'm glad it was you." She smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. "I'm glad it was you too." And in the quiet that followed as the city glowed outside and two tiny babies slept peacefully nearby, something between them shifted again deeper now, rooted in something real, not obligation, not contract, but love. Weeks passed. The twins, now officially named Luca and Ella, were growing stronger every day. Their personalities had started to peek through. Ella was loud and dramatic, always the first to cry. Luca was calm and observant, content to watch the world in silence. Khloe had learned to function on little sleep. Her movements became automatic. Feed, burp, soothe, repeat. But even on the hardest days, she felt purpose. Ethan was still working. Of course, he had a company to run, but he came home earlier now, took calls from the nursery, insisted on giving nightly bottles and reading bedtime stories, even if the babies were too young to understand. Khloe watched all of it unfold with a quiet sense of awe. He was becoming a father, not just on paper, not just by obligation, but by heart. One evening, after the twins had fallen asleep, Ethan invited Khloe to the rooftop terrace. It was the first time they'd been alone together in weeks without babies or bottles between them. The city lights shimmered below them, and the air was crisp, filled with possibility. "I wanted to show you something," Ethan said, pulling a folder from his jacket. Khloe raised an eyebrow. "Another contract?" "Not exactly." She opened it and found documents with both their names' joint custody papers, along with a long-term guardianship agreement. But more than that, there was something else. A deed to the apartment. "You're giving me the apartment?" she asked, stunned. "I'm not giving you anything," Ethan said. "We'll own it together. If we're going to raise these kids together, you deserve stability. A home." Khloe's eyes welled with tears. "I don't know what to say then." "Don't say anything. Just stay." She nodded, unable to speak. He stepped closer, gently brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I meant what I said before. I didn't plan on you. But now, I can't imagine any of this without you." Khloe reached for his hand. "Me neither." As the wind moved through the quiet rooftop and the city buzzed below, Ethan leaned in slowly. And Khloe didn't pull away. The kiss was soft, honest. A promise. And in that moment, everything changed again. The seasons changed. Spring turned to summer, and the apartment, once a space of silence and formality, now echoed with baby giggles, lullabies, and the soft hum of a life reborn. Khloe and Ethan fell into a rhythm neither had anticipated. They were partners. Not in the traditional sense, but in something even more profound. Every bottle fed, every sleepless night, every step forward became part of a bond that had started as a transaction and had become a family. One warm evening, Khloe sat on the nursery floor with Luca in her lap and Ella playing nearby. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching them with quiet affection. "I didn't think I'd ever have this," he said. Khloe looked up. "What? A chaotic house with toys everywhere?" He smiled. "No, a life that feels whole." She stood and walked over, Luca now asleep on her shoulder. "I didn't think I'd ever have it either," she admitted. "But here we are." He took her free hand, just like that. It was simple, real. Their journey hadn't begun with love. It had begun with desperation, survival, and business. But somehow, through it all, they had built something stronger than either expected. Not just a family, not just a home, a second chance. As they stood together in the soft glow of the nursery light, their twins dreaming peacefully beside them, Khloe knew This was exactly where she was meant to be. Before you go, if this story moved your heart, share it with someone who believes in second chances. Leave a comment below. What was your favorite moment? Tap the like button to show your support. Subscribe and follow for more stories like this, because sometimes love doesn't arrive when expected, but when it's truly needed.